morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm one of those I like to start right on time. It's 10:30, and actually I'm overdue by a minute. So we're very casual today. And I think really all the workshops are that way as part of Blitz Week. So feel free to, ask questions of us at any time. The way we're going to do this, first of all, let me just explain to you what we are. The program of the Faculty Teaching Fellows has been ongoing for a number of years. I am sad to say that really we're the last of it. The program will be discontinued after this semester. Why? You can imagine why. Budget cuts, trying to reimagine some various concepts that maybe the provost office might want to do. I'm not really sure exactly what might be involved, but anyway, so we are the last three of the Faculty Teaching Fellows. So we definitely wanted to put together something that we could leave with you all to help you jumpstart your spring semester. Each of us has a few tips that we will share with you, but like I said, it's very informal, so feel free to, at any time ask any of us questions. So I'm Melony Shemberger, this is Brian Bourke, and Kelly Rogers. So Brian is going to start first, and then Kelly, and then I'll wrap us up. Okay.
Well, good morning, everybody. I want to echo Melony's welcome and thanks for joining us. So as I started thinking about this, what are my tips for a spring semester? I'll give a little bit of background and kind of how I frame these types of things. As a faculty teaching fellow, my focus has been on online teaching. I teach quite a bit online. I don't teach online exclusively, but it has been the dominant modality for my teaching in my time here at Murray State. And so a lot of these things that I share are framed around online teaching, but also want to make sure that I'm mindful and not everybody teaches online. Things could be adapted to face-to-face or even hybrid approaches as well. So as I think about a spring semester, well, when we think about our academic calendar, this is just the start of another semester, but in our yearly calendar, it's the start of a new year. And so I was thinking, okay, so a new year, we want to start fresh. If you teach the same courses, or at least one of the same courses from semester to semester, that's also kind of where my thinking was for this as well. Okay, did I find myself in a rut in the fall? How many of us were just so glad that the fall semester ended? How many of us are glad when every semester ends?
That's why it's a semester.
That's right. Sometimes I'm jealous of our colleagues who are on the quarter system because it's just over in 10 weeks instead of 16. So when I think about, again, it's a new semester, but also the beginning of a new calendar year, my first thought was making time or finding time. Well, we don't find time. We have to make it. We have to make the conscious effort to try something new in a course. Maybe something I've never done. Maybe a tip I picked up at a faculty development center workshop or the Teaching Tuesday newsletter or some other source. And when I think about this, it's a way to force myself or force ourselves to try something new. So if you're teaching the same courses on a regular rotation, it's easy to just walk in, change the dates on the syllabus, update Canvas, and away you go. So with the spring semester especially, so I don't feel like I'm just continuing that same rut that the fall ended with, if it ended with a rut. So if I force myself to mix things up, maybe I try a new activity. And so I want to give an example of an activity that I might try this semester. I teach, so all of my courses are at the graduate level, and I teach college administration. And one of the courses I teach is about college students in the United States. And we look at the different demographic categories and identity categories that we might find on college campuses today. And so one of the activities I'm going to ask students to look at is to find a blog somewhere that addresses one of the course topics. People blog about anything and everything today. It's not hard to find a blog about any given topic in any academic area. You might say, oh, come on, there's got to be some academic area. Maybe there is, but I did a little cursory searching one day, just curious. Who's blogs on astrophysics? Well, actually a lot of people, it turns out. Who blogs on neurobiology? There are a lot of people that blog. So a wide range of subjects. Who blogs about anthropology? A whole lot. So it's a way to get students engaged in finding information to bring back and to share with the rest of the course. It opens up students to different perspectives than simply reading from journal articles or textbooks. Then when it comes to trying something new, it's easy to just say, oh, I really don't have time to make something new. I've got all these other things going on, from start of the semester meetings. Who has that time? Well, it's a good idea to have an accountability partner. So find a colleague, whether it's in your department, someone in this room, hey, I'm going to try this new thing this semester. And maybe that person says, hey, I think I'm going to try something new as well. Check in with each other. Because it's really easy for me to justify to myself why I didn't do something. But if I have to explain it to another human, that gets really embarrassing, and I feel bad, particularly if that person actually followed through. So my number one tip is to make the time to try something new. My second tip is to take the pulse of the course, of the class, at multiple points in the semester. And so in an online course, I actually use a Canvas survey. And I ask 6 questions. Number 1 is, what is one thing you like about this course? Number 2 is, what is one thing you do not like about this course? And I'm very purposeful in asking them for one thing, because I ask multiple times in the semester, and I don't want it to turn into a gripe session on a survey. Because ultimately, I want actionable items that I can address. So what do you like, what do you not like? What is one thing that could be improved? So I ask them what they don't like, but then also I ask them in a different way, what's something you think could be improved? Because maybe they don't like the textbook. Well, the reality is that's probably our textbook for the entire semester, so changing it might not be realistic. I ask them if they have any other comments they want to share, so that's the opportunity to give me a laundry list of complaints. Their airing of the grievances they didn't get out for Festivus. Then I ask them on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate this course? And then on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate your learning so far? So I want them to think critically. And I explain it. I actually post a little video for my online courses. Post a video, hey, I'm going to ask for your feedback a couple of times, and I really want you to think deeply and not just click, click, click. So rate the course and rate their own learning. So do they feel that they're getting something from the course? But also I explain that learning is a two-way street. It takes effort on their part, that learning isn't passive. So I space those out. And so in an online course, I'll do it sometimes in my face-to-face courses, but I'll explain a different method in face-to-face that I use. At about the 6-week mark, I'll administer one of those surveys. Then about the 10-week mark, week 10 or 11. So there's still time in the semester. So if there's something that there's an issue with, I have time to change it. Or maybe that I'm seeing a number of students pointing out that really don't understand these sampling procedures that we're talking about in research methods class. And I see multiple students demonstrate or express confusion. Well, that means I need to kind of circle us back around, just shift some things in the course and revisit some of that content so to make sure they have those skills that they need. In a face-to-face class, something I might use is something that one of the professors in my doctoral program used called GOTS and needs cards. There's nothing fancy. You bring a stack of index cards. One side, you write GOTS, the other side, are needs. And every week, we would write on the GOTS side, what is something that you feel you gained from that class session? And then the needs side, what is something that you feel is still lacking? Or sometimes he would frame it as, what's something you want more of? So there might be a week where we had a very lively discussion around the readings. And he saw that and said, oh, I wonder if they want more of this type of reading or more of this topic. Then he'd make some changes to the course moving forward. Doing that every week got a little bit tedious, particularly when you had the same professor for 4 courses in a program, and he did it in every course. Yeah. So my program's small. We have 2 faculty members as a graduate program. So students have us for multiple courses. So the GOTS and needs every week, I think, would get a little draining on students. But I usually do those about once a month. The difference, so you might wonder, why do I use the survey only twice in a semester in an online course, but then do something monthly in face-to-face? Well, I'm there with them face-to-face, weekly. So I'm still getting feedback from them through our discussions, through nonverbals, the different ways that students provide their feedback. So my second tip is to take the pulse more than once in a term. And then my third one, and this is one that I think is probably tough for a lot of us, and something that I'm going to attempt this semester. So there's my public accountability. Share control of the course. Talk about a way to mix things up and keep things fresh. Give students choices. So maybe they have a choice in the way in which they progress through the material of a course, which is easier done in an online format or a hybrid format than a face-to-face format. Are there assignments that can be negotiable? So do students have a choice in either writing the 20-page term paper or writing 3 8-page critical essays or something like that? Provide some sort of variance in the assigned readings. Maybe everybody completes reading A, but then they have choices for readings B through F. Now the tricky part with that is you have to build in an accountability system to make sure that students are doing the work, but also how do you frame discussions in a way that addresses the one common reading and then these other choices. That one can be a little bit tricky to navigate. And I think the benefit for giving students some sort of control is that it communicates that the course is a shared responsibility. That it's not just about you dispensing the vast knowledge that you have on your subject matter, and reinforces that learning is a shared experience. So those are my 3 tips. Make time to try something new, take the pulse of the class, and share control of the course.
Do you think that last one was better if it's each individual is given their own choice rather than it being like the whole class voting on something or forget?
Yes. I've tried the whole class voting thing, and sometimes people will vote based on, I bet everyone else is going to vote this way, or if you do, raise your hand to vote. Yeah, that doesn't really work out too well. Providing that individuality in the choice.
So they might have their choice, they might be doing something different than someone else in the class.
Yes. And then from an instructor's point of view, let's say you do end of the semester presentations, and the presentations vary based on whatever the key assignment was that people chose. So you get a lot of variation in final presentations. It ticks some students off because they like to check in with their peers. Hey, what are you doing to work on this project? Wait, what? Why are you doing that one? I'm doing this one. Who am I going to check in with? You can't always control that.
Nice. Good stuff. All right. Okay, I'm a little bit different, but that's good. And but first, I'd like to say that a lot of things that Brian was talking about resonated because, first of all, like you were talking about shared learning and shared responsibilities in the course. Yeah, I teach adventure education courses, experiential learning, and we talk about common adventures where people share responsibilities. As we say, if we go on a multi-day backpacking trip, I'm not an outfitter doing everything. Everybody in the class has shared responsibilities. So that concept is something that we do quite a bit. And then you talked about the having the same student in 2 or 3 classes, how that can confound that GOTS and needs assessment, things like that. I found that is so tough when you come up with what you think is a good idea and you want to use it in multiple classes as either a way to get to know your students or to get feedback from them when you're using the same thing and it's like the students roll their eyes because they just did it an hour ago or whatever, you know, so I found that to be challenging as well. You know, I mentioned to some of you when you came in that I've kind of been in hibernation. I've been at home during the break with my teenage kids, and so I needed something to kind of wake up my thought process. So that's why mine's a little different. I have a bag of things I'm going to pull out and start talking. First, I'll kind of back up and I'll say that I'm Kelly Rogers. I teach over in human development and leadership, or community leadership and human development. There you go. And I teach recreation. I teach nonprofit classes. My kind of focus is experiential learning. That's what I like. I like to do hands-on stuff, service learning stuff, experience. And so that's what I'm going to kind of be talking a little bit about today. Out of my bag of tricks, I'm going to pull out a few things. The last piece of bread from the Christmas holiday. The bag or the pouch of baker's yeast. And then the sourdough starter. So if you want to get a neat smell, you know, we'll open this up and do it. But I wanted to start out with this kind of example to kind of show, this kind of gets back to basics when it comes to when you're teaching your class. And so I'll kind of segue into that, but I want to start with yeast. I want to kind of get to how you make bread. Obviously, you know, a lot of folks, when you make bread, you pull out your packet of yeast. And I didn't know this, but this stuff's only been around about 150 years. It hadn't been around all that long. So when I was on a backpacking trip, this guy that I was with, he said, "Oh, you like to cook? I like to cook." And then he started talking about making bread. And then that's when he introduced me to sourdough bread. And I didn't know anything about it. You know, I thought, well, you get the packet of yeast, you know. And so he told me about this, that, you know, for thousands of years or however long, people have been using sourdough as their starter. And I would imagine that it was an accident, that somebody just left something out, all this bacteria started happening, and then before you know it, the bread rose, you know. But when you think about the process, you know, what do people use yeast for? Well, they use it to rise something. They use it to rise bread, or they use the fermentation for alcohol. You know, there's lots of purposes for it. If you just leave this out like I've been leaving it out, this little concoction that you made out of some flour and water, and I put a little honey in there, and sugar or whatever, it starts to bubble. It starts to bubble up and it starts to ferment and starts to become active. So when we think about our students, you know, I have this temptation that when I start the semester out, that I just want to jump straight into content. You know, I know that I've got to get all this into them before the end of the semester, and I got to start fast and hard. And I forget that you've got to have a good start. You've got to have a good starter. You've got to have something that is going to ferment in your students, you know, and take all that carbohydrate and create some carbon dioxide. You know, you got to have some kind of a process to happen. And so, you know, that's what I think about when I think about the beginning of the class. I have to kind of slow myself down, and I have to start to think, you know, what is it that's going to give the students the best chance? Now, in one of my classes, and I always refer to this, so if you've been to any of my workshops, one of the classes I teach is Leisure and Aging. That's one of my favorite classes because you have students that are 18 to 22, and they're at the beginning of their adult life, they're excited about life, and they have some stereotypes or biases about older adults. And so I have to somehow get them from point A to point B when they think about older adults. And so I always pose things from the perspective of the value of life. You know, I start out with, do you think your parents value you? Do you think it's valuable? Are you going to add something to society? You know, all these kind of questions. And I go, what about older adults? You know, and then we start getting into that discussion about them. And And so I try to get something bubbling up in them. I try to get them thinking about things before we actually get into the dry, boring statistics of, well, there's this many older adults in the United States, and they represent this much of the population, and these are the healthcare issues, and this is that. And so I try to get a good start. I try to get things fermenting. I try to get them to think and on a path to understanding. Okay? Kind of like bread. Now this bread only rose so far because I only did a little bit of this before I jumped the gun, and it only went so high, and it's kind of thick and dense. The last time I did it, though, I had a nice big loaf of bread. But that's because I took the time to let the starter get to where it was supposed to be. And there's a little test. You talk about gauging where the students are. With this, you're supposed to get a bowl of water, drop a couple clumps of this in, and if it floats, okay, then it's ready. Well, my problem is mine's kind of like a little bit under the surface, and I'm like, time to go. I've been working on this. It's time to go. And then I end up with a lump. So you got to think about getting your students a good start, getting them on their way, and so that you're going to end up where you want to be before you ever jump into all that hard content. The second one that I would think about, and this is real applicable for today because it's the weather conditions. This is a bat. What are bats made out of? Wood. What kind of wood usually? Hardwood, hickory. So this is a very rigid bat, right? It's made out of wood, so it's rigid. It's very rigid. But this is wood as well, and it's very flexible, all right? And so with a wind advisory today, that's good, because if it was all rigid and the wind hit it, it might topple it. But if you notice, trees kind of sway, don't they? And so that's that flexibility. So think about your students. Think about your students. Think about your class structure. In some ways, it needs to be rigid. In other ways, it needs to be flexible. My last point is going to be about consistency, so don't get me wrong. There's a time that you need to be consistent, time in and time out. But flexibility, and you think about wind. When I was first started teaching, I had like some mentors say, now these students are going to walk up to you, and they're going to say that their grandmother died 5 times. Most people only have 2 grandmothers, right? And they're going to tell you this and they're going to tell you that. And so, I kind of had this mindset of they're lying to me. But the reality is that this is the time of life where they have all these things happen to them. So flexibility can be really important. Just like a tree, it might bend. And when a big wind blows and hits your students, you've got to think about, what's really happening to them. I don't know, let me kind of gauge this with you guys. If you talk to your students like I do, grandparents die, sickness happens. I don't know how many times that I've heard a student say that their parents decided to get divorced when they were in college. The kids are out of the house, it's time to get divorced. But for a student, that can really hit them hard like a gust of wind. And so being flexible can be a very important thing. But also some other areas where you might want to be flexible. And don't get me wrong, the rigid part is, this is whatever class. This is chemistry, this is math, this is a social science class, this is an education class. It's got a number, it's got a content, it's lower, upper level. Certain material has to be covered. So you need to do that. But in terms of flexibility, when you covered certain material, how fast you go. Maybe you speed up, maybe you slow down. A big thing about being flexible, which is hard for us, because if you've got a class of 30 students, it's hard to think about this, but different students learn differently. So they've got different learning styles. And so where one person, they might be, photographic memory. Another person, big thing I'm into is kinesthetic feel, like hands-on. They learn by doing. things like that. You have to think about being flexible in how you teach somebody. And so that can take a lot of time. Being flexible enough to take advantage of a teachable moment. If you've got tunnel vision and you're teaching a certain way, and out of the corner of your eye you see an opportunity because it presented itself, but then you go, no, we're going this way. You might miss a great opportunity for learning. So it's where, I've been out with people, our whole goal was to hike from point A to point B and see this thing and talk about this thing. And I've had somebody stop us to look at something else, and we spent a half an hour there. And that was there was more learning, more great, stuff happening there than would have happened up there. But it's taking the time to do that. And then being flexible, this is a big thing that's going to happen to us this semester, I guarantee you, is when your technology fails. Okay? So I know Melony has some technology. I'm waiting to see whether it actually pops up or it says no signal detected. Okay? So we'll see. But being flexible, that can be really important. But also, when you need to be rigid, be rigid. Okay? The last of my 3 points, if my stuff doesn't roll away, is consistency. Okay, what do I have here? I've got a bottle, and it says on the label, 100% extra virgin olive oil, and it says cold pressed. And a lot of them say first cold pressing, and they say 100% extra virgin olive oil. So my whole life, when I got this bottle out and I dumped it into whatever I was cooking, I always thought, this is extra virgin olive oil. Until one Sunday night, my wife and I were watching 60 Minutes, and there was a whole expose on counterfeit olive oil. And of all places, Italy, and how there was a black market that controlled all this stuff, and that you may not be getting olive oil, you may be getting a blend. Because when I get this, I know, when I go into the store, and my wife goes, that's on sale. And I flip it over and I go, it says blended, honey. It's blended. Canola, sunflower, all these things, which is fine, But if it says on it 100%, then that's what I want. That's consistency, okay? Now, when we think about consistency with our students, all kinds of things come up. Because I'd say the first few years that I was teaching, and I introduced inconsistency into my teaching, into my classroom, then all hell broke loose, okay? Going back to this for a second, if you introduce something that's not pure, it's not 100% olive oil into something that you're cooking, my wife used the word corrupts. It corrupts the food. I would say it just makes it taste different. But if you want something to be the way you want it, you got to use 100%. Well, when you're dealing with students, you got to think about consistency. If you are inconsistent, let's just say, let me get the right sheet here. 3 olive oil. Taking attendance. Okay, I've done this before. Sometimes, I tell them I'm going to take attendance every time, but then I get lazy and I don't take attendance. That can really mess things up because the students at the end of the semester will be like, well, I didn't see you take attendance that day. And if you didn't take it then how do I know that your attendance record is right? So that sort of thing. And also, are you going to mark me tardy? No, you're here. You're okay. Sit down. Somebody else is like, you marked me tardy and I was just a little bit late like that guy was. So I wasn't consistent. Same thing about grading. When you grade people, you've got to grade consistent. You can't, mark somebody one way when their paper looks exactly the same as this other person, or their presentation looks exactly the same as this other person. When I turning in assignments, I get this all the time. You've got to have a consistent policy. No late papers means no late papers. Missed presentations means missed presentations. if it's late and you have 10% off, that's what it is. No matter what the story is, whatever. And because students are paying attention, especially if you do it in front of the class. If you're up there and you're talking to one student, those little ears perk up, you know, and you've got to be consistent because it can kind of corrupt the class. This is my biggest one, is faculty, and, you know, maybe I've been accused of this, but playing favorites in class. You know, like you act one way towards one person and a different way towards somebody else. So being consistent in how you act, and then being consistent so they know who they're getting when you show up. My biggest pet peeve in life is moody people. You know, they haven't had their coffee this morning. They rolled over on the wrong side of the bed. They whatever. Well, with students, they shouldn't have an inconsistent personality, like a multiple personality symbol up at the front of the classroom. They shouldn't have that. They should have the same thing every time so that they can approach you and they know that what the kind of response they're going to get, whether it's good or bad. They know they feel that there's a certain consistency. Okay, because you suffered through my presentation, I got a couple bonuses for you. Okay. Now, I may get some pushback on this, but I think as a faculty member, you should be friendly, not necessarily their friend. Okay? Friendly, but not necessarily their friend. It's kind of like with my teenage kids. I'm constantly saying, hey, I'm a friendly parent, but I'm still your parent. You know, as compared to I'm your best friend. You know, that sort of thing. So that's important. Also, knowing the names of your students as early as possible in the semester, I think is important. And I've tried everything. One, it's great in Canvas, or not Canvas, MyGate, where you've got their pictures now on the roster next to their name. The only problem with that is if they're a senior and that was their freshman picture, they don't look anything like that. And so what I've done, and this is where they get irritated with me, is I group my students, obviously, in their class, but on my iPhone, let me go on back to last semester. And I'll have them write their name on a piece of paper, hold it in front of them, and if you do this and they yell, Dr. Rogers does that, that's irritating. But I'll also have them put on there a little something I need to know about them. So Chloe, if I can read her writing, this is new now that I'm 50, almost 50. Chloe said, and I asked what she wants that I need to know about her. She says, I'd like to learn ways to help older people be more outgoing and help them experience things. So that's what Chloe says at the beginning of class. But I get her face, I get her name, and I get something that she wants me to know. And it could be anything from something like that to I'm an identical twin, I love my cats, whatever it is. But I get to start to know them. And what I like about this is I can just, if I can do it, I can just flip through my students and see them. And I kind of do that at the beginning of class, and I start to figure them out. So that's a little point. And then the last thing, this is the most important, I've been using this since last night because I hurt my back, is pain management. Pain management. Okay, this is one of those little shocker things you put on your back and you turn it up to 10 and you hit lower back. And what I mean by that is we're human and we need stress relief. We need the ability to leave the work at the office. And we need a diversion. And because I teach recreation, I'm a fond believer in you need something to divert you or be a diversion from, school, from class, from your students, all those issues. And so I'll throw in a run or something like that, and I'll get out of the office and do that. So that's what I had to say. So I hope it was somewhat entertaining.
Very good. Let me just tell you a little bit about what I do. I teach journalism and mass communications. I'm in the middle of my 4th year of teaching, and I really, really enjoy it. Trying to help students who are learning to become journalists and media professionals. and what they have to do. This presentation, my tips are based on my experiences and what I'm encountering not only in my classes, but also with my own colleagues in the department. So I'm hoping maybe there can be some takeaways that you might want to implement yourself. So these are my 3 tips. A new year, a new way. Evaluate something at some point. Don't know, ask. Okay? They sound really simple, but we're going to kind of go through each one of those real quickly. Some of these, in a lot of ways, resonates what Brian was talking about earlier, but I think it might take it into a different direction. First of all, how many of you have maybe some great ideas already? You know, Brian has brought some good points, Kelly has brought some good points, and now your head is swimming with some ideas. Or maybe you saw something this morning or last night, and if you're like me, you start going into a little anxiety mode. Because you're thinking, ooh, I could grab that, ooh, I could do this, ooh, I can do that. The thing is, and we're always told this, you know, Rome was not built in a day. It's kind of the same way with our courses. We can't change everything overnight. So one thing that I always advocate to new faculty or even to my colleagues who have these great ideas, I'm like, slow down. First, let's select a course that you're wanting to do something different. Maybe it's a course that you've had forever, and you're just now on some sort of autopilot mode, okay? And we don't really want that. Or maybe it's a new course. Maybe it's a course that's been challenging to you. It seems like every semester you're getting a group of students that you're just not getting through to them somehow. It does not matter. Just select a course, okay? Like I have one in my head that I plan to do some different things with this semester. In that course, then choose a lesson, a project, some sort of assignment, some sort of element that you maybe have done before. But maybe it's one of those that you have received in past a poor student performance rating on it. Maybe, I don't know, like maybe with you probably got your yellow sheets back in the last couple of weeks. I got mine yesterday, and as in many cases, they weren't that helpful. But sometimes they will note some things that they did like and things they did not like. And if you were one of the fortunate ones who got something back that said, I really wish that maybe we had more time on this. That's something you can really grab and deal with. Maybe there's something that's been difficult material, a lesson that's just flopped. I've had that. I've prepared this great discussion with some neat interactive assignments in class or whatever, and it just flops for some reason, okay? That's an opportunity for you to go back and just reevaluate. Implement a new approach. So take that one thing in that one course, and let's throw it out the window, and let's revamp it somehow. Maybe if you're like me, I'm always on the search for web-based tools. I love them a lot. Students really like them too. They like to experiment with them, and I always preface by saying, this may work. You may find this a little childish. You might find it this or that. And what I have found is that they are really receptive to it. They really enjoy trying new things with you. So find maybe a web-based tool. This is one thing I'm doing with my graduate class this semester. I've always kind of wanted to flip a classroom, but never had the guts to do so. So I'm not flipping, I'm going to tip a little bit. I'm just going to tip, okay? Maybe that's an idea for you. In which that simply means rather than giving them all the information for them to do and then hopefully come prepared, it's basically just doing it in half, okay? So with my graduate course, that is what we are really going to be doing a lot of, is tipping this semester. I don't know, schedule a speaker of the month. That way it gives you a break from a day. And sometimes the students too, that's where I really see a lot of the student engagement, is when they see the professionals that in the field that they're preparing for. So I've done that before and that's worked well. That might be an idea for you. There are plenty of ideas. Those are just some things that came to my head that I've done before. The key to all of this though is to identify one thing. One's the magic number here, because you cannot take your entire 4-4 load or whatever load you have and trying to reaccomplish everything that you're wanting to do. Just choose one thing, one course, one assignment, and then one new type of activity you want to do. So a new year, a new way. That's the first one. The second one is to evaluate something at some point. In addition to teaching, I also serve as the assessment coordinator for my department in the undergraduate programs. Assessment's a dirty word in a lot of times. My colleagues, when I say assessment, I know they throw things at me, basically. They just wad up paper and just like, shut up, Mel, we don't want to hear it. Because, yeah, I do have to put together all those plans. But I do more than that. I try to offer some ideas for them in their classes. If I come across something in my readings or workshops or conferences, I bring it back. Because that's really the purpose of a workshop or conference, is to take that stuff back and share with your colleagues in the hopes that they can do something with that. Formative assessment, I made the mistake of my colleagues thinking that everybody knew what formative assessment was, and they didn't. Summative assessment, I'm just throwing some terms out there. I'm sure many of you probably know what those mean. I have here just a couple of ideas. Maybe forget test. Maybe do test a different way. One thing that's always worked well for me in the last semester, believe it or not, I have to admit I've never been a friend of rubrics. I used to hate rubrics. And I think it's because of the editor in me and being a journalist, in which we don't really use a whole lot of rubrics. It's more line by line, trying to get students to understand things better that way. But by golly, when I started implementing rubrics last semester, everything changed. My time changed. Even the student feedback changed quite a bit. They were able to understand and see exactly where their problems were. So evaluate something at some point in that one course with that one activity maybe, okay? There are plenty of learning assessment techniques out there. I even brought a book that I just finished reading last week. This was my Christmas break reading. I loved it, believe it or not. I've already made notes. I've already, in fact, my department has a workshop tomorrow about assessment. And I know they're just dying to hear my stuff here. But this is a possibility. There are so many things out there. You just have to even just Google something, and you can, find what you might be looking for. But I've really become a big believer of assessment in the last several years. Okay. And then my very last one here is have questions, don't know. This is really simple here. You're going to ask. Hopefully ask one of us three. Okay. Like I said, this is our last semester of the program. And I think you've been able to see that each of us has a strength to offer. Brian here has great strengths in online teaching. Kelly, in addition to his cooking, is also really good with the hands-on experiential learning. He is a great motivator in that. My background is a lot in assessment and some writing. So there's something that I think, if you're having a problem with in a class, with an assignment, if something's not going right, definitely call on one of us three. There's also a fourth resource, and that is that Faculty Development Center. And some of you have already had the opportunity to meet Dr. Faith Watson, who is our new Faculty Development Center Director. And if you're like any of us, we've gone to several workshops. Sid and I are very much deep workshop components here of that. So we really have enjoyed that. But definitely take advantage of us three. Really use us if at all possible. And I think that's. And I have to admit, we do want to help, right? Yeah, I've been able to get a few people to email me or call me, but I would like to have more because I also learn from them as well. Maybe an idea flopped in their class, but it might work great in mine. You never know. And I think that's all I have. Any questions for any of us three, or any comments?
Yeah.
Maybe sharing some things that.
Can you go into more detail about the rubrics, like what did you actually do and how does it work?
Sure. So rubrics, I do everything in Canvas. Everything I do in Canvas. I don't use paper anymore. So anytime my students have to do a paper, they still write it in paper format but upload it in Canvas. They see the rubric ahead of time. So that way when I have an assignment created, there is a rubric that's at the bottom in which they can see how they're going to be assessed. I designed the rubric in a way that I want them to see what are my most important points of emphasis going to be. And that's where I structure it. In my field, it is important that, for instance, they have strong lead sentence development. So I will structure that high in the rubric and give that greatest number of points. And then I just kind of go down. I have maybe 4 or 5 areas. I don't like rubrics that are like, what, 8 to 10 large criteria. I think that's a little much. So I try to keep it about 4 to 5 components that I like in a rubric, that I want my students, I want to make sure they master these things, or they have some sort of, they can definitely develop at this level. So that's how I do it. And I'm more than happy to show you examples if you need that. I can send you one. I think, like I said, ever since I've been really gung-ho about rubrics, it was every assignment, everything had a rubric.
Yeah. Hey, Melony, I could echo that in that on Canvas, when you create those rubrics, and you grade a student's paper or assignment or whatever, and you make comments and you give them feedback. But when you hit that button on that particular grade with that particular criteria, that's like immediate feedback that is not something to where, a student will maybe look at your comments and say, why did I get a C? And then you have to, in your mind, kind of go back to it, revisit it, kind of compartmentalize all that. With this, it's like, this is why you got a C, because it was more descriptive than analytical, or it was this compared to this, and there are those set levels. And that's what I like about rubrics is that you can hit that button.
Yes.
And they've got it.
And you don't have to mark up every single time they commit that error, or you can just make it one time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's saved a load of time for me, more than I imagined. I found that if you do more of the front work at the beginning, then when it comes time to grading, assessing, it just goes by that much quicker. Yes.
I totally agree with you that rubric is really make the things structured, and it's easier for students and for yourself to see, to grade. But one thing I struggled a little bit is how to balance how much details you need to put in. For example, when I ask them to write an essay, I always struggle whether I should put it in the rubric. You need to write at least 1.5 or 2 pages, minimum 1.5 to 2 pages, or you can give them flexible with like 2 pages to 4 pages. And sometimes some students just write exactly 2 pages, and another student wrote 5 pages, and how you grade them. I'm struggling on how much details you should put in.
Right. And that's a good comment, and it's one that I've also have struggled with myself, but that also gave me the opportunity to evaluate, is this really what I want them to really master at this point? Is it about the page length? I kind of give that more up front, just saying, maybe 2 to 4 pages. Of course, I do more assessing of news stories, so those come really later in our program. So when they ask me, well, how long should my story be? And I tell them, basically they're going to meet that because they're not going to write any more than necessary. But if they go over, that's fine. I'm still trying to make sure, or at least if they're going to go past that, are they still mastering the content, the other areas that I want them to really show some great development or mastery or whatever.
Hey, Melony, what I was going to say is I could have a set of criteria, like minimum requirements for the assignment.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
And that might have page number, or I do word length because they might do it in a text box. And so I always say so many words as compared to page.
I normally require them to write a single page, or unless I have to ask them to write double pages, so it's single page, 1
Yeah.
edge.
What I'm saying though is you could have minimum criteria that the paper includes these minimum criteria, and then have a separate rubric for like how they wrote the paper, the content, that sort of thing. They've got to meet the minimum criteria. Like I might put in it that they're not going to get above a C if they don't have the minimum criteria, or you play around with that. But you might separate that out as this is, all papers are required to have this, but this is what I'm really grading,
I just want to say, in general, overall, the last step of rubric development is actually using it to grade. So you may find that you have developed a very nice rubric, but then having an excellent paper, not so good one, and a terrible one, using the rubric to grade those, that will give you a lot of insight as the subject matter expert for it. And also, sometimes instructor may create a very nice assignment, but you don't know what a good example of it is. You just give it to students and see what they make of it, and then you may or may not have a rubric. If you have a rubric, that's the time you're testing it out on the assignment. I would encourage you, if you do an assignment, try to come up with a good example of what you do the assignment yourself, and you will see the challenges that are associated with doing the assignment. And when you do the rubric, grade that assignment. And so that is one process of helping you as well.
Students really like samples.
They do, to the point though where I feel they almost hold that against you. I've had that happen to me. They're like, well, this example only had it like this. And I said, the thing is, they don't always remember what you say when I know I've said this. That's a good example, but it was also missing some other parts or whatever. Especially when I just had maybe just those early artifacts and that was all I had to show them because it was the first time that we did the project. But yeah, they love examples.
I added one sentence. This is not the best.
Yes, that's what I've told them to. These are not
That's
necessarily
a
the
good
best.
approach, yeah.
But these are, they give you some ideas. But yeah, you're exactly right.
And whether or not you decide to give the student the sample, that's another matter.
Yeah.
But you should know what a good product looks like in
Right.
terms of what you
Exactly.
decide whether or not you want to share that. But
Yes.
I used to have welcoming syllabi, but over the ages I've found that you have to be a little more of a lawyer to cover all the bases. How do you balance those?
I've gone back and forth from one semester to another with syllabuses. I mean, it does follow the standard, the way that it needs to appear for university requirements, but I like to throw in, I guess, a little bit of my personality. My students know that I don't accept anything late. And it's actually, it looks like a warning sign in my syllabus. I do put 3 times, deadlines are not suggestions, deadlines are not suggestions, deadlines are not suggestions. They see that, they can hear that tone almost just by reading that. They hear my voice. And I think it's a little bit of, it's both. I've got my personality in there, but I still meet what the university requires to have in there. I just find places to put it.
Yeah. My average syllabi now is about 5 pages because I just redid them, and they're about 5 pages. Before Canvas, they were like 10 pages.
Yeah.
And I was like that lawyer type. Every semester I reevaluate what was an issue this semester. Okay, it's going in the syllabus. And the problem that I found with syllabus and now even Canvas is students just don't read it, or they say they read it, but they don't. And I find myself almost sounding sarcastic when I say, it's in the syllabus. Check the syllabus. And so I think for me, it's a combination of like emphasizing it in class on not just at the beginning of the semester, but at different points so that they remember it. So that it's timely for whatever's coming down the road next, that sort of thing. But I've got all the little disclaimers and stuff like you say, but it's hard for them to digest, I guess.
How about first assignment, read the syllabus?
Well, there are
I
some
do
ways
more
you
of
can do a
that.
syllabus quiz.
Yeah, you
know,
can test them on it.
That's an idea. And give it a low stakes grade. If you want to give it like a participation grade of some sort or something.
I have the first discussion board.
There you go.
Asking students to write what you read in the syllabus.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do it creatively if that's what you want to do. But I'm a lot like you.
Okay.
It's in the syllabus.
Oh, one time I came into class, I had like 3 gift certificates for a free cup of coffee or something like that I gave out to students that when I went into Canvas, after I told them to read the syllabus and everything on Canvas to get familiar with the class, I went into the analytics and I saw, and if somebody hit a certain threshold, they got the free cup of coffee. You know, it's just like, because some of them, you know, it's like they never opened it, and it's been 2 weeks.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments or ideas even to share? Well, thank you all so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.